Picture this, you're in the middle of a massive stadium, the lights are blinding, the ground is literally shaking from 60,000 people screaming in unison, and right there in front of you is the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. The music is blasting, his dancers are moving in perfect sync, every beat is electric. But then, something happens. Something no one in that stadium expected. The music stops. The dancers freeze. And Michael, the man who almost never broke character on stage, turns his attention to a single spot in the audience. One fan has collapsed, right there in the chaos, and within seconds the entire arena shifts from wild celebration to stunned silence. Now, if you've ever seen footage from a Michael Jackson concert, you know fainting wasn't rare. People didn't just cheer for him, they lost control. Fans screamed until they couldn't breathe, they cried uncontrollably, some even passed out the second he stepped on stage. It was hysteria on a scale we almost never see today. But here's the thing, what made this night different was not that a fan fainted. It was what Michael did next. He stopped everything. And in doing so, he showed a side of himself that made thousands of people in that stadium, and millions watching later, see him in a completely new light. Think about it, most performers, especially at that level, would just keep going. The show must go on, right? But Michael? He wasn't just a performer. He was someone who noticed, who cared, who wasn't afraid to put the spotlight on a single fan even when the entire world was watching him. And that's why this moment became one of those unforgettable chapters in his legacy. So today, I want to take you inside that unbelievable night. I'm going to show you what actually happened when Michael Jackson interrupted his show for a fainting fan, how the arena reacted, and why this one moment still sends chills down people's spines decades later. Because this wasn't just about music. It was about connection. It was about a superstar showing the world that even in front of tens of thousands, he could still see the one. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this moment left an entire stadium speechless, and why fans still talk about it to this day. Before we dive into the exact moment when Michael stopped his show, we need to understand the atmosphere that made this possible. Because here's the thing, Michael Jackson's concerts weren't like anyone else's. They weren't just shows, they were full-blown cultural earthquakes. By the time he launched the Bad World Tour in 1987, Michael wasn't just famous, he was untouchable. We're talking about the most recognized face on the planet, a man who could walk into any country and cause traffic to stop, schools to shut down, and news stations to go into frenzy mode. His concerts were an extension of that energy, only magnified 1,000 times. Fans didn't just show up to his concerts, they surrendered themselves to the experience. Some people camped outside stadiums for days just to get a seat close to the stage. And once the lights went out and Michael appeared, the emotional overload was too much for many to handle. There are reports that during his concerts in Europe and Asia, entire rows of fans fainted the second he lifted his hand or simply looked in their direction. Security teams literally had to carry people out while the music was still playing, and paramedics set up stations outside just to handle the sheer number of medical emergencies. This wasn't just random hysteria, either. Psychologists have actually studied this phenomenon. It's a mix of what's called mass hysteria and parasocial relationships, where fans feel such a deep, personal connection to a star that their bodies react as if they're meeting someone sacred. Add the deafening screams, the flashing lights, the anticipation, and it becomes a perfect storm where fainting wasn't just possible, it was practically expected. And nobody, not the Beatles, not Elvis, not even modern stars like Beyoncé or Taylor Swift, reached that level of consistent, uncontrollable frenzy that Michael inspired. But here's what makes the fainting fan in this story so special. Normally, Michael didn't stop the show when it happened. He kept performing, knowing security and medical staff were trained to handle it. After all, fainting was so common at his concerts that if he stopped for every single case, the concert would never move forward. But on this night, something about the situation caught his attention. Whether it was the way the fan collapsed, or how visible it was from his perspective, or just Michael's instinct to care, this time, he couldn't ignore it. And that's the exact moment where this story shifts from being just another wild concert anecdote into one of those legendary, unforgettable MJ moments. Because when the King of Pop stopped his show for a single fan, the entire stadium realized they weren't just part of an audience, they were part of something deeply human. So here's where it all goes down. The arena is already in chaos, not the bad kind, but the electric, uncontrollable chaos that always followed Michael. He's mid-performance, the beats of Billie Jean echoing through the speakers, dancers moving in perfect sync, the spotlight chasing his every move. The crowd is already on edge, screaming with every spin, every kick, every note. And then, suddenly, something breaks that rhythm. Somewhere near the front section, just beyond the stage barriers, a fan collapses. At first, it's hard to notice. Security is used to this, they've seen it before. A couple of guards rush forward, hands raised, signaling to medics who are already on standby. But this time, it's not just the staff who notice. Michael himself sees it. Now, imagine this from his perspective, the blinding lights in his eyes, the sound of tens of thousands screaming so loudly he can barely hear himself, and yet his focus snaps to a single person in distress. He slows, almost like time itself bends. The dancers, trained to follow his every cue, freeze when they realize Michael isn't moving in step anymore. The band hesitates, the instruments soften, and within seconds, the unstoppable machine that is a Michael Jackson concert grinds to a halt. The crowd doesn't quite know what's happening yet. From the stands, people are still jumping and shouting, but those closer to the stage feel the shift immediately. The music fades. The King of Pop, the man known for his flawless timing and precision, is standing still, pointing toward the commotion. He gestures to security, signaling them to clear space. And then, something happens that shocks everyone. He walks toward the edge of the stage and kneels down, straining to get a closer look. The medics push through, lifting the fan carefully, trying to avoid making the situation worse. And in the middle of this, Michael raises his hand. Not in a dance move. Not in a choreographed gesture. But as if to calm the crowd, to tell them to hold back, stay patient, give the fan room. It's such a small motion, but in that moment, it carries the weight of authority over 60,000 people. You could feel the energy shift. The screaming quieted, replaced by a nervous hush. People craned their necks, trying to see what was going on. Was the fan okay? Would the show continue? And most importantly, how was Michael Jackson, the untouchable superstar, going to handle this? What made it powerful wasn't just that a fan fainted. That happened all the time. What made it legendary was that Michael noticed, and he cared enough to stop everything. And with thousands of eyes locked on him, he made it clear, at that moment, one fan's safety mattered more than the biggest show on earth. Now, here's where Michael turned a simple emergency into something unforgettable. Remember, this is a man who built his entire career on perfection. Every spin, every beat, every lighting cue was timed down to the millisecond. Interruptions just didn't happen at a Michael Jackson show. And yet, when he saw that fan faint, he broke every rule of show business in the most powerful way possible. Instead of looking away and letting security handle it, Michael leaned into the moment. He walked to the edge of the stage, crouched down, and kept his eyes locked on the fan being carried out. It wasn't dramatic or exaggerated, it was quiet, deliberate, and deeply human. You could almost see the concern on his face, even from far back in the stands. For those close enough to witness it directly, it was shocking. The biggest star in the world was not singing, not dancing, not entertaining. He was waiting. And then came the gesture that sealed it. Michael raised one hand toward the crowd, palm out, steady, calm. It was like he was telling 60,000 people, relax. It's okay. Let them through. And what's wild is that it worked. An arena that seconds earlier had been roaring with screams went almost silent. Fans stepped back, making room. The chaos melted into order, not because security barked orders, but because Michael Jackson asked for it without saying a word. This moment showed something few stars ever reveal: genuine empathy. Michael could have turned his back, let the medics handle everything, and gone right back into the song. No one would have blamed him. But by pausing, by choosing to put one anonymous fan above the performance, he showed why his fans loved him so fiercely. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the connection. Think about how rare that is in entertainment. Most artists are trained to keep the show going no matter what. If a fan faints, it's unfortunate, but the concert rolls on. Michael flipped that script. In the middle of the largest stage in the world, he made it about one person. And that choice rippled through the crowd like electricity. People who were there that night said it felt like time stopped. Instead of being swallowed by the massive scale of the event, they felt like Michael was reminding them that he actually saw them. That he wasn't just a performer on a pedestal, but a human being who cared about the people screaming his name. And that reaction, that pause, that concern, that raised hand of calm, turned a fainting incident into a legendary display of compassion. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't choreographed, and maybe that's why it stuck in everyone's memory. It was Michael Jackson at his most real. The silence was the first thing people noticed. Imagine that, a Michael Jackson concert where, for a brief moment, you could hear your own breath. 1 second the crowd was deafening, a wall of sound crashing over the stage, and the next, tens of thousands of voices fell quiet. It was like everyone collectively held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. You could almost feel the tension pressing down, the kind of stillness that only happens when thousands of people are locked onto one thing at the same time. And then, as the fan was lifted by medics and carried toward the back of the stadium, something extraordinary happened. The quiet turned into applause. Not the usual cheering, not the frantic screaming that followed Michael's every move, but a wave of clapping that started in one corner and spread like fire across the arena. It was gratitude. Relief. Respect. People weren't just clapping for the fans' safety, they were clapping for Michael. For noticing. For caring. When the medics finally made it out of the sea of people, Michael slowly rose from his crouch, straightened himself, and gave the smallest nod, like he was silently telling everyone, okay, they're safe now. We can continue. And just like that, the tension snapped. The crowd erupted again, but this time it wasn't just the usual hysteria. It was louder, more emotional, like 60,000 people realized all at once that they weren't just watching a performer, they were witnessing a person who put them first. Some fans who were there that night later described it as almost spiritual. They said the energy shift was unlike anything they had ever felt at a concert. 1 second they were worried, the next they were crying and cheering with even more passion than before. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It felt like they were part of something bigger, like they had been let into a private moment of Michael's humanity that no camera or choreographer could stage. What's fascinating is how collective emotions work in massive crowds like that. Psychologists call it emotional contagion, when one person's feelings spread through a group like wildfire. In this case, Michael's calm concern spread to tens of thousands. His quiet hand motion created silence. His nod created an explosion of joy. That's not just star power, that's influence on a level most performers could only dream of. And here's the kicker, once the fan was safe and Michael gave the unspoken signal, the show picked back up, and the crowd went even crazier than before. It was as if the interruption recharged them. Instead of breaking the magic, it made the night more unforgettable. People didn't just go home saying, I saw Michael Jackson perform. They went home saying, I saw Michael Jackson stop the world for a fan, and then give us a show we'll never forget. Now, on the surface, this might seem like just another fainting incident at a concert. After all, Michael shows were legendary for how often fans lost control. Medics carrying people out was almost a normal sight. But this particular moment became unforgettable for a reason, because Michael didn't treat it like just another fainting fan. He stopped. He paid attention. He broke the unwritten rule of show business, that the performance always comes first, and instead put the fan first. That simple decision changed the entire meaning of the night. What it revealed was something people rarely got to see from Michael on stage, his human side. Most of the time, he was this almost otherworldly figure, the sequin glove, the impossible dance moves, the untouchable king of pop. To the crowd, he was larger than life, someone so far above them that fainting seemed like the only way to process the experience. But when he stopped the music for that one fan, he showed that he wasn't above them at all. He saw them. He cared about them. And in that moment, he wasn't just a superstar, he was a human being showing compassion. Psychologists actually have a term for this kind of bond between fans and celebrities. It's called a parasocial relationship, where fans feel like they personally know the star, even though they don't. Usually, that connection is one-sided. Fans give their devotion, and the star performs from a distance. But what Michael did was flip that dynamic. By pausing for that fainting fan, he fed back into that relationship. He made his fans feel like the love wasn't just going one way, it was mutual. That's incredibly rare, and it's part of why his fan base was so fiercely loyal. And there's a bigger cultural reason too. Michael was performing at a time when mega concerts were at their peak. Artists were expected to be flawless machines, pumping out spectacle after spectacle. But Michael reminded everyone that music wasn't just about spectacle, it was about connection. The biggest show on earth could stop for one person, and instead of ruining the night, it made it legendary. That's why decades later, fans still talk about this moment. It wasn't about the fainting, it wasn't about the silence, it wasn't even about the cheer that followed. It was about what it meant. That the king of pop valued his fans not just as a screaming crowd, but as individual human beings who mattered to him. And that's why, even now, this story lives on, because it captures the heart of why Michael wasn't just loved as an artist, but adored as a person.